Hello and welcome to another episode with Gardening for Beginners. Of course, if you're planting your garden for the first time, this may be the first episode you've seen, which is perfect, because in this video, I'm going to share with you the things you should do when starting your very first vegetable garden. First and foremost, you really want to find out what your planting zone is. Most areas of the world have their country split up into zones. These zones help gardeners estimate when their first and last frost dates are. So why is it important to know when your last frost date is? This will help guide you in knowing what plants you can plant and when to plant them. I know it's probably not the most exciting or glamorous sounding thing to do, especially as a first step, but you really want to do your research on this because even a light frost can kill most spring and summer vegetables, and temperatures above 75 degrees Fahrenheit can cause fall and winter vegetables to stop producing. Lastly, knowing your zone will be helpful to you because if you're in a Facebook group like Gardening for Beginners, it will help other more experienced members help you better if you can tell them what your zone is. For our members in the U.S., you can go to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's website and find your zone there. With this info, you can use the Farmer's Almanac to determine your first and last frost dates. For countries outside the U.S., I've actually had good success by doing an internet search using your country's name and the term planting zone. For example, searching for South Africa planting zones will pull up a number of maps under images you can use to find your planting zone. Our group has a video on this if you're more of a visual learner. I'll drop a link in the description. Next, figure out what you'd like to plant. You probably already have, but if you haven't yet, now's the time to make those decisions. Plant stuff that you like to eat, and if you're like me, also plant stuff that you've never eaten before and you're genuinely curious about trying. But your first year, don't plant too many of those just in case you hate them. Plant easier plants with high yields like cucumbers, squash, zucchini, green beans, peas, radishes, okra, and tomatoes. Save the exotic stuff for next season. Now that you know what you want to plant, decide on if you want to start your first year with pre-grown transplants or if you want to start from seed. Honestly, if it's your first year, I highly recommend starting with transplants. Starting seeds, outdoors or indoors, is a labor of love, and you're more than likely going to need stuff like grow lights and all these other things that truly you probably want to put off learning about until later. But if you're interested in starting seeds indoors, we also have a video on that, which will also be linked in the description. Next, find a good spot for your garden. It needs to be an area that gets at least 6 to 8 hours of full direct sun. Some vegetables and herbs are good in partial sun, but most of them are very sun-loving plants. So while it's okay to eye certain shady spots of the garden for herbs and such, you want to make sure the majority of the area gets lots of sun. An optional part of this step is to essentially graph your garden on paper. Lots of folks like to measure out square footage to make sure they have enough room for what they want to plant, and this is a good way to ensure your inspiration matches up with any space limitations you have. Hey, some folks are born planners, right? Once you've got your area plotted out, you have a decision to make. Do you want to build raised beds, container garden, or just plop stuff directly in the ground? Each method has its own set of pros and cons. Raised bed gardening, while arguably the most expensive of the three, is more pleasing to the eye and you have more control over the soil makeup your plants are in. If you're not confident in the quality of your soil, like if it's clay heavy for example, you may want to consider this option if you aren't too concerned about your budget. Container gardening is convenient, the containers can be mobile if needed, and while the containers may kill some of the grass if they're on the ground, you aren't tearing your yard up as much. And while it's not as expensive as raised bed gardening, you still have to buy more soil than if you were to plant directly in the ground. But you do have similar control over the soil makeup that you have with raised beds. The last option is just digging holes and putting plants or seeds in them. It's cheaper and frankly is the best option if you have good soil. The roots of your plants will have more real estate to work with compared to container gardening, and you won't have to do as much material gathering at the hardware store either. Me, I do a combination of all three. I know, I cheated a little bit there, but you weren't expecting a definitive answer from me, were you? The truth is, I like all three. Container gardening for my bush variety tomatoes and peppers, raised beds around my greenhouse because I think it looks pretty, and in-ground planting for my cucumbers that go crazy and vine everywhere. I like it that way. So you've got your basic game plan down. Now it's time to take an inventory of what tools you have so you'll know what you need. Digging tools, gloves, fertilizers, soil amendments, pots and containers. These are all things you'll want to consider. It's good to take an inventory now before you get started so you can just get right to gardening when you're ready. Besides, I hate going back and forth to the hardware store. So now you're ready to get started. Is there more to it? Absolutely. But now that you have the basics down, you know how to get started and build upon that knowledge. So what questions do you have? Please feel free to ask them in the comments. Also, if you aren't in our Facebook group yet, please join our group. We're international and chock full of members that enjoy helping others. I'll include a link to our group in the description. And if you liked this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and happy gardening.